All right, so we're diving into haunted homes today, but not just like telling ghost stories.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
more about like how you can actually figure out what's going on. If you think you've got something weird happening in your own house.
Yeah, it's a topic that never gets old, does it?
It really doesn't.
People have always been drawn to the idea of ghosts and hauntings.
Yeah, for this deep dive, we're using Jennifer Kilgrave's book, Ruling Out the Unknown, A Skeptic's Guide to Haunted Homes. And it's really interesting.
It is. I mean,
It's spooky, but it's also like practical.
Jennifer Kilgrave really brings a critical eye to the topic.
Yeah, like she's saying, okay, maybe there are ghosts, maybe not.
Right.
But here's how you can figure it out.
It's like she wants you to be a detective in your own home.
I love that. You know, it's just so interesting to me. Why are we so fascinated by the supernatural, even now?
Well, we're pattern-seeking creatures, right?
Yeah.
So when something weird happens, especially at home,
Were you supposed to feel safe?
Ex-
Your brain tries to find an explanation.
and sometimes the explanation that fits is, well,
A ghost. It's like our minds go straight for the spooky option, even if there's probably a totally normal explanation.
right, and that's where skepticism can be so helpful.
So, like, next time you hear a weird noise, don't just assume it's a ghost.
Yeah.
Ask yourself, what else could it be? Could it be the plumbing? The wind?
A raccoon in the attic.
Exactly. It's not about saying ghosts don't exist.
Right.
It's about being thorough and looking for all the possibilities.
That's where the book is so helpful.
Yeah.
It debunks a lot of those common myths.
Oh, totally.
Like every creaky floorboard means you have a ghost.
I mean, come on. Houses make noises.
Exactly. Old houses especially.
My house is over 100 years old. I swear, sometimes the plumbing sounds like an orchestra warming up.
I can imagine.
If I didn't know better, I'd think I had a whole band of ghost musicians in my pipes.
There's a case in the book, actually.
Well,
A family in Massachusetts kept hearing footsteps in the attic, but it turned out to be their heating system.
oh, wow. That's the kind of thing that makes you realize how easily we can misinterpret things.
Absolutely.
But the book goes even deeper than that. It talks about how our environment can trick us.
You might be surprised by how many things can create those ghostly effects.
Really? Like what?
Well, you've got settling foundations,
Okay.
pests, the wind.
Hmm.
Even mold can play a role.
Mold. What do you mean?
Certain types of mold can actually cause neurological symptoms.
Whoa, seriously.
Yeah, it's pretty wild.
So it's not always just in our heads.
Right, sometimes it's the house itself messing with us.
Okay, so it's not just sounds.
No, not.
It's the whole environment.
Exactly. Think about lighting, temperature, even the acoustics of a room.
Like if a room has weird echoes, it might feel creepier.
Exactly. Those things all play into our perception.
So our houses could be like playing a symphony of spooky sounds and we don't even realize it.
Well, maybe not always spooky, but definitely capable of influencing how we feel and what we perceive.
I never thought about it that way.
Yeah.
And then there's the whole thing about how our brains work. The book mentions this thing called pareidolia,
Ah, yes, pareidolia.
which is basically our brains wanting to see patterns, even if they aren't really there.
Right, like seeing faces in clouds.
Exactly. Or like seeing a ghost in a dark corner when it's just a coat rack.
It's our brains trying to make sense of the world.
And when we're already scared or on edge, our brains are even more likely to jump to those spooky conclusions,
Exactly. It's like our brains are looking for danger everywhere.
even when it's not really there.
And you know what makes all of that even worse?
What?
Our own psychological state.
Oh, right. The book talks about that too.
Stress, anxiety, big life changes.
They can all make us more prone to seeing things.
It makes sense when you think about it.
Yeah.
When you're stressed, your senses are heightened.
So you're more likely to notice every little creak and groan.
Exactly. And your mind is already preoccupied with worries.
So it's easier to interpret those everyday things as something sinister.
It's like your brain is looking for an outlet for that anxiety.
So instead of a ghost in the closet, it might just be your own stress talking.
In a way, yes.
It's not to say that people's experiences aren't real,
Right.
but our internal state can definitely color how we see things,
Absolutely.
especially when it comes to stuff that's hard to explain.
It's a fascinating interplay between our minds and the world around us.
So we've covered a lot of ground here. The allure of the supernatural, how our environment can trick us, and how our own minds play a role.
It's like we've peeled back a few layers of the haunted house onion.
And I have a feeling there are a lot more layers to go.
Oh, definitely. We've only just scratched the surface. So you're saying our homes could be haunted by bad wiring and leaky faucets?
Well, not exactly haunted,
Right.
but those things can definitely create some spooky effects.
It's amazing how easily we can misinterpret things, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
Especially when we're already primed to believe in the supernatural.
I think that's a big part of it.
We see what we expect to see, you know?
Speaking of seeing things,
Yes.
the book has some really interesting case studies.
Oh, they're fascinating. I love how Jennifer Kilgrave breaks them down.
Me too. They really highlight how a little investigation can go a long way.
It's like detective work, but for spooky stuff.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Okay, so hit me with a case.
All right, picture this.
Right.
An old Victorian house.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
The people living there are hearing voices.
Oh,
Things are moving on their own.
classic haunted house stuff.
Right. They're feeling watched, the whole 9 yards.
So what did they find? What was causing all that?
Well, the investigators started by looking at the house's history
Okay,
and the environment around it.
makes sense. You got to rule out the obvious stuff first.
Exactly. And it turned out the house had really old wiring,
Well-
and it was right next to a radio tower.
Ah, so the voices were actually just radio interference.
Exactly.
Not so spooky after all.
And then there were the objects moving on their own. The investigator discovered that the house had a forced air heating system.
Oh, yeah. Those can be powerful.
Right. And it was creating these strong drafts.
Enough to move things around?
Enough to make it look like unseen hands were pushing them.
Wow, that's wild.
And that creepy feeling of being watched.
Yeah, that's the one that always gets me.
The investigator found that it was mostly due to the layout of the house.
Really?
The hallways were narrow and dark,
Okay.
and there were a lot of mirrors.
So it was creating illusions of movement in people's peripheral vision.
Exactly. And that led to that feeling of being observed.
So basically the house itself was designed to be creepy.
In a way, yes.
That's so cool.
And these are just a few examples from the book.
There are more.
Oh, there are tons. Faulty wiring, plumbing issues, even animals getting into the walls.
It's amazing how much stuff we blame on ghosts.
Right. When it's often just, well, normal house stuff.
I guess that's why Jennifer Kilgrave focuses so much on those DIY investigation techniques.
Exactly. Because if you take a methodical approach
You can often figure out what's really going on.
and hopefully put your mind at ease.
Okay, so let's talk about those techniques. What can people actually do?
Well, one of the simplest but most effective things is soundproofing.
Soundproofing.
Yeah, I know it might not sound very exciting,
It does make you think of recording studios, not ghost hunting.
but think about it.
No.
If you reduce the ambient noise...
You can hear those subtle, unusual sounds more clearly.
Exactly. It's like turning down the volume on the everyday world.
So you can focus on what's really weird.
Exactly. And then there's recording and analyzing sounds.
Okay, so like using a voice recorder
Even a simple one will do. Capture those strange noises.
and then listen back carefully.
Right. Pay attention to the frequency, the duration, any patterns.
And you might even be able to use some of those free audio analysis tools online.
Exactly. It's like having your own little forensic lab.
Cool. What else?
Well, don't forget about good old-fashioned observation. Pay attention to the environment.
Temperature, air pressure, that kind of stuff.
Exactly. Those things can sometimes be linked to unusual experiences.
Like if you keep feeling cold spots, you could use a temperature sensor to see if there's actually a drop in temperature.
Exactly.
That's a good idea.
And don't forget about your neighbors.
My neighbors.
Yeah. Talk to them. See if they've experienced anything strange.
Wait, so I should go door to door asking if they've seen any ghosts?
Not necessarily, but just ask if they've noticed anything unusual.
Okay, I can do that.
You might be surprised what you learn.
Yeah, like maybe that weird humming sound is just coming from their new sound system.
Exactly. Or maybe that ghost in your attic is actually just a raccoon.
That's been getting into everyone's insulation.
It happens more often than you think.
It's amazing how much we can learn just by talking to people.
It really is.
So we've got soundproofing, recording sounds, observing the environment, talking to neighbors. That's a lot of good stuff.
It's a good starting point.
But what if those investigations don't give you any clear answers?
That's a good question.
Or what if those experiences start to feel really overwhelming?
Well, in those cases, it might be time to think about getting some professional help.
Okay, so like calling a paranormal investigator.
It could be, yeah.
Wouldn't that just make things seem even scarier, though?
Not necessarily. Just like with any other field,
Okay.
there are good investigators and bad investigators.
How do you know if you're getting a good one?
Well, a good investigator will take a scientific approach.
Okay.
They'll use tools and methods to gather evidence.
So no Ouija boards and seances.
Probably not. They'll be more focused on things like EMF meters.
What are those?
They detect electromagnetic fluctuations.
Interesting.
And they'll use thermal cameras to look for temperature changes.
Oh, like those cold spots we were talking about.
Exactly.
So even in the world of paranormal investigation, there's still a place for science and technology.
Absolutely. And a good investigator will also prioritize your well-being.
Okay, so it's not just about finding ghosts.
Right.
It's about finding peace of mind.
Exactly. It's about understanding that you're not alone and that there are people who can help you make sense of these experiences.
That's reassuring, actually. But I'm curious, are there any other approaches besides those traditional investigations?
Oh, absolutely. The book actually talks about a bunch of alternative approaches.
Really? Like what?
Well, one of the most powerful tools is mindfulness.
Mindfulness.
Yeah. Things like meditation, deep breathing, spending time in nature.
Okay, so it's about calming your mind and reducing anxiety.
Exactly. And that can help you see things more clearly.
Because when you're less anxious, you're less likely to jump to those scary conclusions.
Exactly. And don't underestimate the power of your environment.
Oh, right. We were talking about that earlier.
Fixing those creaky doors, improving the lighting.
Making your home feel safe and comfortable.
Exactly. All of that can make a big difference.
That's like we're talking about a whole house approach.
I like that. It's not just about the ghosts, it's about everything.
The physical space, your mental state, even your social connections.
It's about finding harmony in all those areas.
I love that.
And it's important to remember, there's no one-size-fits-all solution.
Right. Everyone's experience is different.
It's about finding what works best for you and taking those steps to create a sense of peace in your life and in your home.
All right, so we're back for the final part of our deep dive into haunted homes.
Time to wrap things up.
And hopefully by now, you're feeling a little less scared and a little more like a paranormal investigator yourself.
Exactly.
So just to recap, we've talked about the long history of hauntings, how our minds and our environment can play tricks on us.
And all those fun DIY investigation techniques.
Oh yeah, we've got soundproofing, recording sounds, checking the temperature, even talking to our neighbors.
Don't forget the neighbors.
They might hold the key to the mystery.
They might.
We've also learned that sometimes those ghostly footsteps are really just loose pipes or creaky floorboards.
Right, and that feeling of being watched. Could just be a drafty window or a well-placed mirror.
And if things get really weird, there are qualified professionals who can help us sort it all out.
It's about finding those answers and feeling safe and comfortable in your own home.
Absolutely. So before we go, what's one piece of advice you'd give to someone who thinks their house might be haunted?
Good question. I'd say don't let fear control you.
Okay.
It's easy to get caught up in all the spooky stuff,
Right.
but remember, knowledge is power.
So take a deep breath
Gather evidence.
and approach the situation with a clear head.
Exactly. Don't just assume it's ghosts right away.
Be open to all the possibilities.
And remember, you're not alone.
There's a whole community of people interested in this stuff.
Researchers, investigators, enthusiasts.
There are even qualified professionals who can help if your own investigation hits a dead end.
Exactly.
All right, so I always like to leave our listeners with something to think about, a little question to ponder after the episode is over. So, here it is. If our perception of reality can be so easily influenced by our environment and our own minds,
As we've seen.
how much of what we experience is actually objective truth?
Ooh, that's a good one.
And how much is shaped by our own beliefs and expectations?
It really makes you think.
It does. I think that's what I love about this topic.
What's that?
There's always more to learn,
Yeah.
more to explore, more to question.
Absolutely.
Well, on that note, we're going to wrap up our deep dive into the world of haunted homes.
Sad to see it end.
It has been a fascinating journey. Thank you so much for joining us.
It's been a pleasure.
And remember, whether you're dealing with creaky pipes or something truly unexplainable, approach it with a curious mind and a healthy dose of skepticism.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Thanks for listening, everyone.